Story 1. Oathbringer, the third book in the Stormlight series, is one of my favorites. My wife bought me the fifth book for Christmas, so I'm rereading the series to refresh my memory. I also just finished reading Range. As a jack of all trades and polymath, I found it to be an engaging read. Story 2. The Foundation by Asimov just started, and as a non-American who began working as a visual merchandising instructor, I have been trying to keep my English, both spoken and written, by reading English novels. Since I enjoy science fiction, this was my first choice. Story 3. I'm one of those people who likes reading several books at a time. At home, I'm reading Fairy Tale by Stephen King, and I'm almost halfway through. At work, where I have a lot of downtime, I just started reading Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. Story 4. A Dance with Dragons by George R.R. Martin. I am not in a hurry to finish it either because who knows if we are even getting the rest of the series. Story 5. Finally, I caved in and started reading the Stormlight Archive. I am a third of the way through Oathbringer now, and I am enjoying it a lot. Story 6. Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. I figured now is a good time to see how a fascist dictatorship is put in place. Story 7. Just restarted rereading The Wheel of Time. It will probably take the rest of the year to get through the series. Story 8. To Kill a Mockingbird and the three Newbound/Brown books about Chris Watts. In Cold Blood, The Truth Within the Lies, and A Deal with the Devil. I'm about to start this one. I need to kill a mockingbird to soften my seething rage with Chris Watts. Story 9. Stranger in a Strange Land by Robert Heinlein. I enjoy science fiction and have heard it discussed many times, but recently a friend suggested it, so I went ahead and grabbed it and started reading. Story 10. Kindle, Clan of the Cave Bear by Jean M. Owl. Physical, The New Hunger Games book. Audio, The Last Harry Potter book. I love Stephen Fry's voice. Story 11. Memoirs of a Geisha. I tried to read it in 6th grade, but I didn't finish it because I couldn't connect with the story at that age. Returning to it in my early 30s, I can't put it down. Story 12. In the middle of two books, Station 11 and Parable of the Sower. Dystopian Futures for the win. Story 13. Dune Messiah, Words of Radiance, The Silmarillion, and Howl's Moving Castle are the books I am currently trying to read. However, I am experiencing mood swings, making it difficult for me to focus on any of them. Story 14. I am reviewing the Pulitzer Prize winners for fiction and have decided to read Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. Story 15. Wool by Hugh Howey. I'm going through a bit of a post-apocalyptic phase. It has a slow start, but I'm really getting into it 200 pages in. Imagine living in a massive underground silo 144 floors deep. If I had the choice of profession, I would work in hydroponics, surrounded by plant life while enclosed in a brutalist architect's wet dream. Story 16. John Scalzi apparently lost his mind during the pandemic and began writing full books based on truly absurd premises. I just picked up his newest one without looking at any reviews, and it's about the moon suddenly becoming cheese and the fallout from that. I love all of Scalzi's work going back to Old Man's War, but his new unhinged style is just a blast to read if you don't take it too seriously. Story 17. I am currently on the Dream app reading Leto's Blessing. The story features a female lead and a hero, along with a mix of intriguing adult scenes. Story 18. I just finished reading The Handmaid's Tale and The Testaments. It was mind-blowing. I hadn't seen the television series, so I convinced my husband to start watching it with me this weekend. Story 19. I am currently reading several different books, but the one I am most consistently engaging with is John Langan's The Wide, Carnivorous Sky, and Other Monstrous Stories. Story 20. Gravity's Rainbow by Thomas Pynchon. Yet again. Additionally, nearly every geological paper on helium exploration and production. For my book, Story 21. Twilight of the Gods, Book 3 of the Pacific War Trilogy. This trilogy has been comprehensive and fascinating. Story 22. My Journey with Dante Through Hell, a reimagining of Dante's Inferno, is told from the perspective of Virgil instead of Dante. It touches on all the same themes but replaces Dante's thoughts and comments with those of Virgil. Written by Drs. P. The book is in Dutch and consists of perfect verses containing 11 lines each. It may never have an English version, but if you read Dutch, consider giving it a try. It is magnificent. Story 23. I am trying to get back into reading this year. Right now, I am reading Dungeon Crawler Carl. It isn't great literature, but I highly recommend it. It is very funny. Story 24. I have The White Bonus by Tracy McMillan, Wintersmith by Terry Pratchett, and Fuzz by Mary Roach checked out from the library. Story 25. Great Expectations took 3 months to read The Count of Monte Cristo. I am trying to clear some classics off my to-be-read pile. Story 26. An email from my boss informed me about the recent employees who resigned and how we will have to do twice the amount of work without any change in pay. Story 27. 3 books. China Goes Global, Profit Over People, Neoliberalism and Global Order, and Rereading the Communist Manifesto. Story 28. Last night, I finished reading The Count of Monte Cristo for the first time, and I am genuinely shocked at how good it was. I need to talk to someone about how great it was, but people have either read it a long time ago or haven't read it at all. It's frustrating because I want to share the experience of this amazing story with someone. Story 29. Star Wars. Darth Plagueis is about Palpatine's rise to power. Andor has me craving Star Wars political dramas. Story 30. I am currently reading The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. It is a thought-provoking exploration of life's choices and regrets. Story 31. The Alcoholics Anonymous Big Book, The Circus of the Damned by Laurel K. Hamilton, How to Be Perfect by Mike Schur, and The Poetic Eddas interspersed with Hannibal fan fiction. I like to keep my brain busy. Story 32. I usually read something on my Kindle and one physical book as well. Right now, I am reading Holly by Stephen King on my Kindle and the physical copy of Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Story 33. Gene Wolfe's Shadow and Claw is an extremely well-written book. Sometimes I think I don't enjoy reading, and then I realize I just need to read someone who can truly write. For me, it isn't enough to simply receive a story. It must be told with some flair. I prefer my prose to be rich and expressive, if possible. Story 34. The Fist of the North Star. I don't think it's meant to be a comedy, but its absurdity makes me laugh. Story 35. The Gates of Europe by Sergei Plokhy is an insightful read that explores the creation of modern Ukraine and culminates in the ongoing war. It provides a strong understanding of why Russia believes it has claim over Ukraine and the attitude it has maintained toward a nation that seeks independence. I also realized that I need to learn more about what communism was like after World War II. Story 36. 4 Miles West of Nowhere by John Phillips. I always looked forward to his articles in Car and Driver, and this one does not disappoint. Story 37. Gathering Moss by Robin Wall Kimmerer. A few years ago, a friend I was just getting to know gifted me a copy of a different book by the same author, Braiding Sweetgrass. Kimmerer is a professor of botany and a Native American. Braiding Sweetgrass compares and contrasts the scientific study of the natural world with the role it plays in Native culture. I enjoyed getting to know my friend through our discussion of that book, and I later lent Braiding Sweetgrass to my mom, who also enjoyed reading it. For my birthday a while back, my mom gave me Gathering Moss, which is similar to Braiding Sweetgrass but specifically focuses on moss. It has been a fascinating read. Story 38. Maniac McGee and the Watsons Go to Birmingham, 1963. I have been going through a tough time mentally and needed something from my childhood to lift me up. Story 39. Hell with the Lid Off is a book about the 1970s rivalry between the Oakland Raiders and the Pittsburgh Steelers. The title comes from a quote about the city of Pittsburgh, which, as a Pittsburgh native who left at the first opportunity, made me laugh a lot. Story 40. The manga Kowloon Generic Romance will be released at the end of the month, along with Volume 14 of The Apothecary Diaries. Story 41, and of Green Gables. I started watching the show because I was looking for low-stimulation content, but it was canceled after the 3rd season. It has a beautiful story and rich vocabulary, and the book is just as wonderful. I highly recommend it. Story 42. Classic Hustler from December 1998. Sometimes it feels like being in a time machine, reflecting on the simpler times back then. Story 43. The Monk by Matthew Lewis. My boyfriend is a big bookworm, so I read whatever he recommends. Although it has been a slight challenge, it has also been a very enjoyable read so far. Matthew Lewis was 19 when he wrote it in the late 1700s and had to withdraw it and republish it because it was so controversial that it upset not just the people in the church but the institution itself. It challenges natural human desires in the context of religious vows. Plot. A monk, known and loved by all, a saint of sorts, succumbs to temptation. Story 44. Green Mars by Kim Stanley Robinson is the second book in the Mars trilogy, and I am mostly enjoying it aside from some pacing issues. I am currently in the lengthy chapter where the Constitution is being drafted, and it is a bit of a slog to get through, so I keep procrastinating. I have heard it picks up in the third book, and the concept of the trilogy is fascinating. Story 45. Brian Schule, Sled Driver. He was an State Route 71 pilot and wrote a book about some of his experiences in the cockpit. I found and purchased a signed copy for a high price, but a collector is a collector. Story 46. Fanfiction and the Dawn of Everything. I am also listening to the new Machiavelli by H.G. Wells. Story 47. Life and Fate by Vasily Grossman centers on a Russian family during a 12-month period of World War II. The capacity for humans to treat each other poorly knows no bounds. Story 48. System Design Interview by Alex Su. I figured I would learn better from books since videos mostly led me down a YouTube rabbit hole. Story 49. Revelation Space by Alastair Reynolds. The series, including Inhibitor Phase, Chasm City, and the Prefect Dreyfus series, occupies a top position in my view of written works. Story 50. My coworker has been lending me his hard copies of the Percy Jackson series, so I am rereading them for the first time as an adult. I went through the first 4 books in 4 weeks, but I have only read the first chapter of The Last Olympian, and it has been about 2 months. Story 51. I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy is a few pages in, and it's very good so far. A heartbreaking and hilarious memoir by iCarly and Sam and Kat star Jeanette McCurdy about her struggles as a former child actor, including eating disorders, addiction, and a complicated relationship with her overbearing mother, and how she retook control of her life. Jeanette McCurdy was 6 years old when she had her first acting audition. Her mother's dream was for her only daughter to become a star, and Jeanette would do anything to make her mother happy. So she went along with what Mom called calorie restriction, eating little and weighing herself 5 times a day. She endured extensive at-home makeovers while Mom chided, "Your eyelashes are invisible, okay? You think Dakota Fanning doesn't tint hers?" She was even showered by Mom until age 16 while sharing her diaries, email, and all her income. In I'm Glad My Mom Died, Jeanette recounts all this in unflinching detail, just as she chronicles what happens when the dream finally comes true. Cast in a new Nickelodeon series called iCarly, she is thrust into fame. Though Mom is ecstatic, emailing fan club moderators and getting on a first-name basis with the paparazzi, Jeanette is riddled with anxiety, shame, and self-loathing, which manifest into eating disorders, addiction, and a series of unhealthy relationships. These issues only get worse when, soon after taking the lead in the iCarly spin-off Sam and Kat alongside Ariana Grande, her mother dies of cancer. Finally, after discovering therapy and quitting acting, Jeanette embarks on recovery and decides for the first time in her life what she really wants. Told with refreshing candor and dark humor, I'm Glad My Mom Died is an inspiring story of resilience, independence, and the joy of shampooing your own hair. Story 52. I was in the middle of rereading The Count of Monte Cristo when my loan arrived from the library for The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. Story 53. Gold in the Water is about the making of the 2000 men's Olympic swim team. I am reading it for the 3rd time to give me motivation to return to swimming, possibly in masters competitions. Story 54. I started reading The Secret History, again by Donna Tartt. I am reading it with my husband this time. I love this book. Story 55. Studying Japanese involves reading a children's book titled The Unfortunate Creatures Encyclopedia, which is also translated as Encyclopedia of Pitiful Creatures. The book contains unusual animal facts and has proven to be quite useful for learning biological terms such as evolution and extinction, along with essential everyday vocabulary like bottom and urine. Story 56. To Shape a Dragon's Breath by Monocle Black Goose is a book club pick. Once I finish that, I need to read Where the Drowned Girls Go by Sinan Maguire, which is part of the Wayward Children series, before my library hold is up. Story 57. How Green Was My Valley by Richard Llewellyn. My friend described it as Little Women, but if Little Women were about coal miners. Story 58. One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig, Betting on Good by Wendy Francis, and Tell Me What You Did by Carter Wilson. Story 59. I just started book 3 of The Expanse, and what a ride it has been so far. I finished the TV show, and it is probably the best pure science fiction I have ever seen. I felt a visceral void in my stomach after I finished it and immediately bought the first book and started reading. I listen to the audiobook whenever I am unable to read. Jefferson Mays is a brilliant narrator. The Expanse has truly consumed my life right now. Story 60. Taking my reincarnation one step at a time. No one told me there would be monsters. I am currently on volume 3. Sure, it's an overused premise for Japanese light novels in the isekai genre, but so far you can kind of ignore the reincarnated aspect and say a random girl gets placed into an unfamiliar fantasy world and slowly adapts to the situation. It's very casual, light-hearted reading with some confrontation, but no significant antagonists yet. Story 61. The Devils by Joe Abercrombie is a unique take on a group of unconventional characters resembling a dark version of a Suicide Squad, featuring a mix of monsters, ghouls, and a sharp sense of sarcasm. Story 62. 2 books. Mary and Atwood's Suggestive Inquiry into the Hermetic Mystery. Arnost Vasicek's In Search of Monsters. Story 63. A quarter of the way through the last book of the 6-book original Dune saga by Frank Herbert. The first couple of books each take about 100 pages to really get good. But Heretics of Dune hits the ground running, and Chapter House. Dune is a direct continuation. The Honored Matri's plotline is excellent. Story 64. Gregor and the Marks of Secret is the 4th book in a middle-grade book series. I loved these books as a child and have been rereading them this week, since I have some free time. They hold up surprisingly well to adult reading, all things considered. The series is by Suzanne Collins, the same author who wrote The Hunger Games. Story 65. I Was a Teenage Slasher by Stephen Graham Jones. A good read that would make a fun movie idea. Story 66. The Echo Machine by David Pakman is a must-read, especially in America. It discusses media literacy, the ability to discern facts from fiction, and the importance of critical thinking. Additionally, if you encounter vocabulary words you don't know while reading, I recommend using the internet to look up definitions. It's incredibly helpful and useful. Story 67. I'm reading The Halfling's Gem by R.A. Salvatore at home, and I just finished the audiobook for Mockingjay by Suzanne Collins this morning at work. I plan on starting The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes soon, probably on Monday. During my lunch breaks at work, I'm reading old Daredevil comics on Marvel Unlimited. I'm on issue 30. Story 68. About 10 minutes ago, I finished Carrie Fisher's memoir, Wishful Drinking. It was okay, just a lot of rambling, to be honest. I am also halfway through my first Stephen King novel, Salem's Lot. I like it so far, and he does a great job of setting the scene. Additionally, I am halfway through listening to The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. Story 69. The first Gears of War tie-in book, Asphofields, was released. Before that, there were the Solomon Kane stories, which were quite controversial, and Frankenstein, which was incredibly moving. Story 70. I am currently reading 2 books, The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss and Malice by John Gwynne. I am enjoying both so far, even though I have not delved deeply into either one yet. Story 71. I just finished reading Arkham Asylum, Serious House on Serious Earth. I usually dislike reading as school forced me to do so, which made me resent it. However, I highly recommend this comic. I genuinely want to explore more comics like it. I still wouldn't read a novel or anything similar, as it's not entertaining enough for me. Story 72, Love Your Neighbor, by Eric Maria Remarque. English title, Flotsam. It tells the story of refugees from Germany in the 1930s, before the war. They are unwelcome and can only stay illegally in various countries until they are repeatedly deported. It is also a love story between two Jewish emigrants. Story 73, audio, Just Kids Patti Smith. Books, The First Men in the Moon H.G. Wells, American Psycho Bret Easton Ellis. Story 74, The Darkness That Came Before by R. Scott Baker is a grimdark high fantasy series with extremely dense philosophical prose. Story 75, The Sound of Murder by Joseph Zelnick is a murder mystery that unfolds during the previews for the play The Sound of Music. It is a clever and well-crafted mystery. Story 76, I just finished a John Scalzi novel. It was okay about kaijus, which were kind of cute. I am sitting and waiting for Devils by Joe Abercrombie to be released. Story 77, A Storm of Swords 2, Blood and Gold and Before the Coffee Gets Cold, while procrastinating finishing Wind and Truth. Story 78, got 3 books in play. The Secret, the second book in the Game of Thrones series, and lastly, a book called The Carnivore Cure. Story 79, The Stormlight Archive is currently about to start book 4, but I took a break and finally read The Hobbit and The Fellowship of the Ring. I have not had the easiest time with the Tolkien books, to be honest. The common feedback I hear is that he overdescribes locations. However, I have not found that to be a problem at all. Rather, the sheer length of his exposition is really hard to follow. For example, when Gandalf or one of the elves goes into the entire history of a place, it is hard for me to retain that information. I much prefer the show Don't Tell approach that Sanderson excels at, although Taravangian can be very Gandalf-like. Story 80, I'm rereading Lamb, The Gospel According to Biff, Christ's Childhood Pal, by Christopher Moore. It's one of the silliest, laugh-out-loud books I've ever read. Story 81, I have been reading a book called Refugee, which tells the story of 3 children going in 3 different directions. It features a Jewish boy trying to leave Germany, a Cuban girl attempting to reach the United States, and a Syrian boy seeking safety in Berlin, Germany. It is a compelling story. Although all the characters are fictional, the narratives are based on real events. Story 82, Black Like Me by John Howard Griffin is about a white journalist who undergoes a skin pigmentation process to experience life as a black man in the Deep South in 1959. Story 83, The Cut and Run series by Abigail Rue. I stumbled across it completely accidentally. The pacing is more unstructured than typical books, which makes it feel very real. When danger appears, it is fast, unpredictable, and brutal in a way I have never read before. Check it out if you want. Story 84. The Expanse has been my favorite series for a while now, both the books and the show. I am currently reading the books for the 3rd time. Story 85. I'm on my 5th book this year. In chronological order, I read 1984, The Handmaid's Tale, Animal Farm, Lord of the Flies, and I am currently reading The War of the Worlds. Perhaps you can guess my favorite genres. Story 86, halfway through Thomas Mann's Buddenbrooks. My siblings reflect that family perfectly. A quarter of the way through Franz Kafka's The Trial. Story 87, The Guns of August discusses the start of World War I. I find it helpful to distract myself from current disasters by reading about past ones. Story 88. I'm reading several things at once because I like having options. In the Harvard Classic series, I'm reading volumes 9, Works and Letters of Cicero and Letters of Pliny the Younger, 27, Essays from Sydney to Macaulay, 29, The Voyage of the Beagle, 44 and 45, Texts of the World's Religions. I'm also pairing the last 2 books with The World's Religions, 2nd edition by Houston Smith. I read a chapter from Smith's book to contextualize the religious texts. Then I read the texts. It works for everything except that Smith has a chapter on Taoism that is not covered by the Harvard Classics, but I have my own copy of the Tao Te Ching, and he added a chapter on preliterate religions that naturally didn't generate any sacred texts. I'm also reading the Harvard Classics Shelf of Fiction, Volume 2, the latter half of Tom Jones by Henry Fielding, because the Harvard Classics series is rather poor in fiction. Other than that, I'm reading Shakespeare's First Folio, a 400th anniversary facsimile edition, which is a photographic reproduction of the Phelps-Clifford Folio held by the British Library. I'm reading it with Shakespeare's words, a glossary and language companion by David and Ben Crystal for reference. So far, I'm 7 plays in, having last read Love's Labours Lost a couple of days ago. The Outlaw Bible of American Poetry, edited by Alan Kaufman and S. A. Griffin. Foucault's Pendulum by Umberto Eco. Revolutionary Road by Richard Yates. The Praise of Shakespeare, an English anthology by C. E. Hughes. 6 plays by Robert Greene. And I'm listening to the LibriVox audiobook of Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen, read by Karen Savage. I've read the novel as a text before, both in an individual movie tie-in edition released when the film with Emma Thompson and Kate Winslet was released, and in a Penguin Deluxe edition of all the novels in one volume, so this time I decided to treat myself to an audiobook. Story 89. Every now and then, I go back and read an entire series. Right now, I am in the middle of the 23 Dune books. I can feel The Lord of the Rings sneaking up on me, along with Game of Thrones. Story 90. I read a lot at the same time, so here we go. Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. Never by Ken Follett. Erasmus, Dwarsdenker by Sandra Langreese. The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Story 91. I am listening to the audiobook of Hold On to Your Kids. Why Parents Matter More Than Peers by Gabor Mate and Gordon Neufeld. I enjoy learning about attachment and the importance of the relationships we have. If you have children, give them your full attention whenever possible. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.